The last memory of Leanne I have is when she was setting off to go shopping and she kissed me on the cheek and she laughed because she got lipstick on me again. And she was always doing that. And I sort of went, oh, and rubbed it off. And she walked out the back door. She just said, bye. And I said, bye back. And I said, don't be late for your dinner. And she was gone.
She was my best friend. She had like a gift, like a big sunshine.
Hello! Welcome to my talk show. It's Turkey.
There were times when we were feeling pretty much down that she may have been taken and killed, but we really couldn't let ourselves or allow ourselves to believe that. Every day when you don't know, you wake up and wonder, is she going to be coming home today?
On November 26, 2000, at exactly 3:36 p.m., a CCTV camera captured two teenage girls leaving a shopping center in Leeds. 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse and her best friend, 16-year-old Leanne Tiernan, were out enjoying some early Christmas shopping. The girls caught a bus back to Bramley, and soon after, they went their separate ways. Later, Sarah tried calling Leanne, but she didn't answer. Worried, she called Leanne's mother, Sharon, to ask if Leanne had made it home. But Sharon said Leanne hadn't arrived yet. She then tried calling her daughter too, but the phone just rang and rang. Leanne never picked up. It was every mother's worst nightmare. A child gone missing without a trace. So, where was Leanne? What had happened to her? Welcome back to Dark Case Files, where we cover solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from around the world. Today, we're diving into the disturbing story of Leanne Tiernan. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. This case takes us across the ocean to England, to a place in West Leeds, West Yorkshire, in a neighbourhood called Bramley. Located between Kirkstall and Stanningley, Bramley is a region that once thrived on industry. It's filled with a mix of 19th century buildings and 20th century homes, including one of the last remaining Edwardian bathhouses. To the north, the River Aire winds through the area, creating a stunning view that visitors to Bramley Fall Park can enjoy. Central roads and railways connect the town to nearby Bradford, and it's just 4 miles from the heart of Leeds city centre. It seemed like an ideal place to raise a family. At least, that's what the locals thought. Leanne Tiernan was born on September 27, 1984, to Michael Tiernan and Sharon Hawkhead in Bramley. Though her parents soon divorced, Leanne kept a close and healthy relationship with her father. She and her older sister, Michelle, lived with their mom in Leeds, while their dad remained an important part of their lives. Leanne also had a special bond with her grandparents. Every Sunday morning, she could be found walking with them to church. Her love for chocolate was well known, so much so that one of her uncles gave her the nickname Chocolate Chip Niece.
Hello! Welcome to my talk show. It's Turkey.
Fun-loving teenager Leanne was a student at West Leeds High School, and she had been busy preparing for her GCSEs. A day out with her best friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse, was the perfect break from all the studying. The two planned to head into Leeds for some early Christmas shopping. Sunday, November 26, 2000, began as a bright and sunny day. After attending church with her grandmother, Leanne returned home to get ready for the trip with Sarah. Leanne wore a black and white ribbed polo neck jumper, black trousers, and a pair of black ankle boots. She added a blue jacket over her outfit, tied her hair in her favorite style, a French twist, gave her mom a kiss, and set off to meet Sarah. The two girls boarded a bus to downtown Leeds. By late afternoon, their shopping was finished, and they were on the bus back home to Bramley. Around 4:50 p.m., they got off the bus and walked a short distance to Sarah's home, before parting ways. Sarah watched as Leanne headed toward Howley Gill, an unlit path cutting through an area of overgrown woodland. It was a shortcut, one Leanne's mom had always warned her never to take after dark. But with plenty of daylight left, Leanne felt safe taking the public footpath. It should have been just a 20-minute walk to her home, but when Sarah called Leanne's house at 5:20 p.m., she was surprised to learn that Leanne hadn't returned yet. Sharon, Leanne's mom, quickly dialed her daughter's phone to find out where she was, but there was no answer. She kept calling over and over again, but at first, the phone rang several times, before eventually being switched off.
And it was actually Sarah wanting to speak to Leanne. So I said, oh, she's not back yet. So I phoned her mobile and it rang on about 20 times, and it just cut off.
At 7 p.m. that evening, Sharon called the local police to report her daughter missing. That same night, the family went to the local church to borrow flashlights, determined to search the area themselves. Throughout the night, shouts for Leanne echoed through the streets. But there was no reply, and still, no sign of Leanne. West Yorkshire Police, led by Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg, quickly sprang into action to find the teenager. It wasn't an easy area to search. There were over 700 houses, open fields, woodlands, canals, drainage shafts, and wells. There were countless places where Leanne could be hiding, and the search team had their work cut out for them. But they were determined to bring her home safely. Helicopters flew overhead while uniformed officers and search dogs scoured the streets, going door to door. To preserve any possible evidence, waste collection in the area was halted. A week passed, and still, there was no sign of Leanne. Investigators worked to reconstruct Leanne's last known movements. With the help of her 19-year-old sister Michelle and her best friend Sarah. Michelle wore the same clothes Leanne had been wearing that day, and walked the exact same route her sister had taken when she disappeared.
I think we were clutching at straws, but we were kind of hoping that she had run away and nothing bad had happened, even though it was so out of character for her.
When the case was featured on the news, several people came forward to tell investigators about a man they had seen near Howley Gill. They described him walking his black and tan dog, about an hour before Leanne got off the bus on her way home. A composite sketch of the man was created and shared with the public. He was described as being 5 feet 8 inches tall, with a stocky build and a round face, possibly scarred. He was wearing a black wool hat, a 3/4 length waterproof jacket, and dirty jeans. The police shared this information, and soon the calls came pouring in. Every man with a dog became a potential suspect. In the end, 70 men with dogs were identified, but all were eventually ruled out as suspects. With little to go on in the investigation, the case began to go cold, but the public's support for Leanne's family never wavered. They did everything they could to keep Leanne's story in the spotlight. Sean Clark, a father of 3 from Leeds, was moved by the story and offered a £10,000 reward for any information leading to Leanne's safe return. Iceland Foods, a well-known supermarket, took action by printing Leanne's picture and details on milk cartons sold across the country. Flyers and billboards featuring Leanne's photo in her school uniform, along with the words "Have you seen me?" appeared throughout the town. Despite receiving several tips and reported sightings of her in towns as far as Doncaster and Blackpool, none of the leads brought them any closer to finding her. Leanne's parents kept appearing on the news, making tearful, desperate pleas for anyone who could help them bring their daughter home. Christmas that year was heartbreaking for everyone who knew and loved Leanne. Her father placed gifts under the tree for his missing daughter, including a Westlife CD. Michelle had bought it for Leanne, but it remained unopened. Months passed, but the search continued.
There were times when we were feeling pretty much down that she may have been taken and killed, but we really couldn't let ourselves or allow ourselves to believe that. Every day when you don't know, you wake up and wonder, is she going to be coming home today?
In the end, over 2,000 homes, sheds, and outbuildings were extensively searched along the route Leanne was believed to have taken home from her shopping trip.
We had to calculate what we would have expected the route to be that she walked, and we call that the red route. The houses along that red route were searched, some 1,200 houses.
Police collected DNA samples from more than 140 men in the area and executed search warrants across Leeds. Yet, despite all these efforts, they still had no clue where Leanne was. Her family and friends held on the hope that she would be found safe. But on August 20th, 2001, nearly 9 months after her disappearance, a heartbreaking discovery in the woods shattered any hopes of finding the teenager alive.
Telephone call from the police to say that they'd found a body in North Yorkshire.
On August 20th, 2001, as Leanne's classmates were heading back to school to collect their GCSE results, Mark Bisson was walking his 2 dogs in Lindley Woods, a dense wooded area inside North Yorkshire. While walking, he came across what initially appeared to be a pile of trash. Upon closer inspection, he realized it was a floral duvet. He untied the twine that held the duvet together, and inside, he discovered what looked like the shape of a body, wrapped in garbage bags.
I saw a sock, and I realised then that we'd actually found a body.
I got the call in the afternoon, and I was told that a girl's body had been found at Lindley Woods. My immediate thoughts were, is this Leanne?
The victim's hands were bound behind her with 3 yellow cable ties, and a leather dog collar was tightly fastened around her neck. As investigators carefully removed the black garbage bag from her head, they discovered the decomposed face of a young woman.
At the time when they first found out, they couldn't really tell us exactly how she died, but they said that it looked like strangulation.
Interestingly, it wasn't the first body found in the area. In 1992, the body of Yvonne Fitt had been found nearby, and her killer was never caught. Detectives hoped Leanne's case wouldn't end the same way. Using fingerprints, authorities were able to confirm that the body was indeed Leanne Tiernan, the missing teenager. An autopsy revealed that Leanne had been strangled with a plastic cable tie. The case had shifted from a missing person investigation to a murder case. Authorities believed the killer was likely local. Leanne's body had been found about 16 miles from where she was last seen. The yellow cable ties used to bind her hands were identified as being from the British postal system, specifically used by Royal Mail or Parcel Force. Additionally, the black garbage bags used to wrap her body came from Morrison's, a well-known grocery chain, with 2 of its stores located near the area. DNA samples were taken from family members, friends, and known sex offenders in the area, hoping to find a match. A fingertip search was conducted in the dense woods where Leanne's body had been found, eventually covering an area of over 20,000 square meters. On September 28th, the day after what would have been Leanne's 17th birthday, her funeral was held at Sanford Methodist Church in Bramley, Leeds. This was the same church where Leanne had been baptized as a baby, and it was filled with hundreds of mourners. Many people were gathered outside the church as well, all there to honor Leanne's vibrant life and positive spirit. Her mother, sister, and best friend, along with other loved ones, carried her white coffin into the modest church. A floral tribute with the words "Night Night Baby" was brought into the service, accompanied by the song "November Rain" by Guns N' Roses. The congregation sang all of Leanne's favorite hymns, including "Give Me Oil on My Lamp" and "Ye Shall Go Out with Joy."
Sort of imagine her, how she used to look when she was curled up in bed. But she was always cold. I always had to go in and rub her back when she went to bed to warm her up a bit. Just sort of, I don't know, just something that keeps you a little bit closer to her. She was lovely. For my little baby.
In the crowd at the funeral was Detective Superintendent Chris Craig, who had led the search for Leanne. As he watched her white coffin being taken to Hilltop Cemetery for her final resting place, his determination to find her killer only grew stronger. The investigators were still puzzled by the circumstances surrounding Leanne's body. The area where her body was found had been thoroughly searched before, and yet her body was remarkably well preserved. Her hair was still tied up in the same ponytail, with the same hair tie and clip she had worn the day she went missing. Upon testing samples of her cardiac tissue, the medical examiner concluded that Leanne had been murdered on the same day she was abducted. Her body had been kept in cold storage for the following months before it was disposed of. The killer had tried to hide her body in a common dump area, wrapped in a duvet, possibly hoping it would be discarded as waste. Unfortunately for him, the body was so well hidden that vital forensic data and DNA were preserved. Authorities were hopeful that this evidence would lead to a breakthrough, but their hopes were dashed when no DNA was found on her body. The investigators decided to focus their efforts on the items found with Leanne. They discovered dog hair on her clothing, which they hoped could provide a DNA profile to help identify the killer. The hairs were sent to a university in Texas, where a new DNA profiling technique for pets had been developed. Though the university managed to produce a partial DNA profile from the dog hair, it was the first time this had been done in a British case, but with no dog to compare it to, the results were ultimately set aside. They then turned their attention to a knitted scarf that had been found around Leanne's neck. Inside the knot of the scarf, investigators found strands of human hair, which were sent for DNA testing. From this tiny sample, they managed to create a DNA profile, providing a promising lead. Next, the focus shifted to the dog collar that had been used to secure the black bin liner around Leanne's neck. The collar was made by a company in Nottingham called Armitage Leather Products, and investigators considered that tracking the purchase of this collar might reveal the identity of the killer. They contacted the company, which revealed that it had sold the collar to 220 different wholesalers across the UK, and they submitted sales records to the police. After a painstaking process of reaching out to each wholesaler, they struck gold on the 112th call. The company, Pet Pajamas, was based in Liverpool and had sold 3 of the Armitage leather collars in Leeds. They provided details of the 3 customers who had made the purchases, and investigators began looking into their backgrounds. One of the customers quickly emerged as a key suspect, John Tayler, who lived in Bramley.
I saw that from Bramley area in Leeds, some 3/4 of a mile away from where Leanne disappeared, was a name John Tayler.
This wasn't the first time his name surfaced during the investigation. When Leanne's body was found, witnesses recalled seeing him in the woods often, walking his dog. But when police went to question him, he claimed the dog had died well before Leanne's disappearance. Had Tayler killed the animal to erase evidence? Who really was John Tayler?
Can you tell me how often you visited Huffley Gill?
I won't have been down there for years.
Okay.
It's not somewhere I used to go, certainly not to walk the dog affair anyway.
John Tayler seemed like just another regular guy. A 45-year-old parcel delivery driver for Parcel Force, part of the Royal Mail, with only a petty conviction for stealing a suit when he was 15. He'd been married, had 2 kids, a son born in 1981 and a daughter born in 1983, but the marriage ended in divorce in 1996. He lived alone in a quiet terraced house on Cockshot Drive, Bramley, Leeds, and to his neighbors, he was just another ordinary bloke. But things weren't as simple as they seemed. Tayler had a dark side. He had a disturbing habit of torturing animals. Neighbors didn't know about his twisted activities, but he had been seen out hunting and torturing rabbits and even stabbing a fox repeatedly while poaching. He found enjoyment in clubbing pheasants to death. In 1982, after moving into his new home, he started buying and breeding dogs and ferrets. His wife, Janet, had been proud of their home, but the overwhelming smell of animal waste started to wear on her. She tried to tolerate it, but things got worse when Tayler brought home 2 large owls. These owls lived off a steady diet of day-old chicks, which Tayler bought in bulk, filling one of his large freezers with thousands of them. That was just the beginning of what would turn out to be a very dark chapter. Janet filed for divorce. Tayler traveled all over the country a lot, but not for work. He'd place advertisements for female companions and would often travel across the country to have sex. He was also an avid user of Lonely Hearts advertisements. Through his phone records, investigators began to track down a number of these women for interviews. Most of them described him as harmless, but some admitted that they'd called the police to report him as a suspect. After Leanne's body was found and details of her murder came out, two in particular painted the picture of a man who enjoyed violence when they were intimate. He'd even told one woman he'd like to have intimate relations with her daughter. Another former girlfriend eventually broke up with Tayler because of his bondage fetish. Tayler would bind her hands with cable ties and put scarves over her face. When investigators asked her to describe how Tayler tied her, she said he kept a bundle of cable ties in a drawer next to his bed. He would place a plastic cable tie around each of her wrists, then link them together by securing both hands behind her back with a third cable tie. This method was eerily similar to how Leanne had been found, and crucially, it was information that had never been made public. 10 months after Leanne disappeared, Tayler was arrested and brought in for questioning. A warrant was served to collect his DNA, and his property on Cockshot Drive was sealed off with 7-foot-high wooden screens. The police began a thorough search of the house and its grounds. In the backyard, they discovered several plants, including a hedge, a plum tree, and a poplar tree. Remarkably, pollen from these plants was found on Leanne's hair, skin, and nasal tract, indicating that she had been in the yard before her death. As they dug further into the garden, investigators unearthed the carcasses of 28 ferrets in a mass grave, along with the skeletons of 4 dogs. One of these dogs had a crushed skull. This raised a chilling possibility. Had Tayler killed his dog to conceal his identity? Further tests on the dog's hair found at the scene confirmed the worst. It matched the hairs found on Leanne's body, connecting Tayler directly to her murder. In the house, the carpet had been stripped away, but upon closer inspection, investigators found pink carpet fibers caught on nails in the floorboards. These fibers were an exact match to those found on Leanne's body. Additionally, Leanne's blood was discovered under the floorboards, further linking the house to her murder. The twine used to tie the green bin liners around Leanne's body was traced to a manufacturer in Devon. They confirmed that the twine came from a small batch produced specifically for making nets to catch rabbits. The batch found in Tayler's home matched exactly to the twine found on Leanne. Furthermore, a large number of yellow zip ties were discovered in Tayler's house. These zip ties, which were not the usual kind, were produced by an Italian company for the Royal Mail. Since Tayler worked for Parcel Force, a division of the Royal Mail, he had easy access to them. In Tayler's kitchen, investigators also found the same type of garbage bag that had been used to wrap Leanne's body. All these pieces of evidence pointed unmistakably to Tayler as the killer. On the property, there were 3 large freezers, and initially, Tayler denied knowing Leanne or having any involvement in her death. However, when confronted with the overwhelming evidence, he admitted that he had abducted her, but he claimed her death had been an accident. According to Tayler, once he got Leanne into the house, there was a struggle, and she fell, hitting her head and dying instantly. However, no evidence supported the claim of a fall. Furthermore, Tayler could not explain why Leanne had been strangled or why her hands had been bound with cable ties. Through further investigation, authorities were finally able to piece together the true events surrounding Leanne's tragic death. That night, Leanne was in the wrong place at the wrong time. As she walked alone along the unlit path of Howley Gill, Tayler ambushed her from behind. Though there were no eyewitnesses, it was later reported that someone had heard a stifled scream. Tayler swiftly covered her mouth, blindfolded her with a scarf, wrapped a coat around her, and marched her to his house, which was 22 minutes away. Once inside, he tied her hands behind her back and seated her in an old church pew in his kitchen. There, he strangled her with a zip tie and a woolen scarf. For months, he kept her body hidden in a freezer in his kitchen. However, shortly before Leanne's body was discovered, friends of Tayler reported that the upright freezer in his kitchen had mysteriously disappeared. Investigators speculated that it had malfunctioned, and in an attempt to dispose of her body, Tayler decided to get rid of the freezer. This fateful decision ultimately led to his arrest and the unraveling of his horrific crime. On February 15, 2002, 46-year-old John Tayler was found guilty of the murder and kidnapping of Leanne Tiernan. He was sentenced to 2 life terms, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. Investigators had long suspected that Leanne's murder wasn't Taylor's first crime. The meticulous way in which he hid and disposed of her body pointed to a history of calculated behavior, and they were right. Once Taylor's DNA was entered into the database, it linked him to 2 previous assault cases that had been in the system. The first assault took place on October 18, 1988, when Tayler, armed with a mask and a knife, attacked a 32-year-old woman as she walked across Howley Gill to pick up her children from school. The second assault occurred on March 1, 1989, though details of that attack remained unclear. These discoveries raised disturbing questions about the full extent of Taylor's criminal past, suggesting that Leanne's murder was just one tragic chapter in a longer, hidden history of violence. Tayler, wearing a mask and carrying a knife, burst into the home of a 21-year-old mother in Bramley. He dragged her into her bedroom, where he attacked her. He stripped, blindfolded, and gagged her before assaulting her while her 18-month-old daughter cried in the next room. For these crimes, Tayler was handed 2 additional life sentences. Over the years, authorities conducted a cold case review, revisiting unsolved crimes with similarities to Leanne's. In 2018, the full extent of Taylor's depraved behavior came to light. He admitted to a series of vile acts committed against 5 women between 1977 and 1996. In one disturbing incident, he held a knife to the throat of a pregnant woman and forced her to perform sexual acts on him. In 1977, just before Christmas, he assaulted a barmaid. These revelations painted a chilling picture of Taylor's long-standing, horrific history of violence and abuse. Tayler pleaded guilty to these attacks and was handed a whole life sentence. John Tayler will never see the outside of prison again. He is currently serving his sentence at Wakefield Prison, a maximum security facility known as Monster Mansion. This prison houses some of the most infamous criminals in the UK, individuals who have committed some of the most horrific and chilling crimes in history. Tayler, now among them, will remain behind bars for the rest of his life.
It's not very nice sitting there knowing that somebody's actually done this to your child. I do feel a kind of connection with families that are actually in the position that I was in before they actually caught John Tayler. The fact that I actually know who killed Leanne didn't make things any easier for me. But then again, I suppose if I didn't know, I would be wanting to know.
Tayler has been named a suspect in nearly 10 reopened cold case murder investigations. These include the murder of 33-year-old Yvonne Fitt, whose body was found in a shallow grave just 100 yards from where Leanne's body was dumped in 1992. 13-year-old Lindsay Reimer, who vanished after leaving home to run an errand less than 20 miles from Taylor's home in Bramley, was found dead 5 months later in a canal. Deborah Woods, who was found burned and wrapped in bin bags and bedding at Leeds railway station after being kept in cold storage, and Rebecca Hall, a prostitute found dead in Bradford, are also among the cases linked to him. Many more victims are still being examined, and there are countless questions about how many more murders and assaults Tayler might have gotten away with, and how long he managed to evade capture. That's it for this episode of Dark Case Files. If you have any questions or comments, let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating and thought-provoking content. We'll see you in the next episode. Till then, stay safe.